I found out about the Z5ii the same way you did. Somebody left a random comment on one of my videos saying that the Z5ii was coming out, right? That's what happened to you? I mean, that did happen, but what really happened was on launch day, I saw a whole bunch of videos. People like Taylor Jackson and Petapixel and Julia Trotti and Manny Ortiz, they all dropped videos. And then I got this email in my inbox. It was from Nikon, and it wasn't just one of those like usual PR blasts from Nikon. It was actually an email from Chris at Nikon to Chris at my house saying, new Z5ii announcement. So I opened it and here's what it said. So we announced the new Z5ii last night, and I might actually have a camera for you to play with, but I would need it back by next Wednesday. Obviously I said yes, but with shipping times and everything, that gave me about a weekend to try and figure out what I thought about this camera. And I didn't have any shoots planned. So right away, started making some calls, and I put together a couple portrait shoots and some sports photography, and now we're gonna go over everything to do with this camera with the limited amount of time that I had with this before I have to go ship this back, which is tomorrow. What's up? My name's Chris Tejas. I'm a photographer and videographer based in Ontario, Canada. I mainly shoot portraits, events, weddings. Basically, I try and photograph people. What's extra exciting about this camera is that this is a full production model with the full release firmware, which means that this camera, the way that I'm shooting it, everything I'm experiencing with it is gonna be the same as what you get on ship date. So that's something to note. Unlike some of the other sort of earlier production pre-release models that were sent to people to test beforehand, kind of nice to have something that's like fully ready to go. Really quick, I want to say a huge thank you to Nikon Canada. They're not seeing any of this footage before it gets to you, and that's really important to note. I do have a lot of positive things to say. That's just because I'm enjoying this camera. So here's the stuff that's fit to print. We've got a 24.5 megapixel CMOS backside illuminated sensor, same as the ZF. We've got a vari-angle touchscreen, dual SD cards, 14-bit RAW photos. We have a mechanical shutter up to 1/8000th of a second. We're getting up to 14 frames per second with that shutter and 30 frames per second using electronic shutter and JPEG. Basically the same autofocus everything as the ZF. Internal and RAW as well as N-Log in the video. We can shoot H.265 in 10-bit. And finally, we have a custom picture control button, which is the sort of first of its kind on a Nikon camera. Now, onto the good stuff. All the photos that I'm gonna share here are gonna be obviously shot with the Nikon Z5 Mark II. However, they're all JPEG because at the time of recording and up until release date, there's not really gonna be any way for me to open up the RAW files and do any processing of them. Some of it, I was using custom picture controls that I created, and for some of it, I was just using standards. I jumped into monochrome for a little while when I was shooting the runners because it was just absolutely way too rainy and it was not nice color anyways. So what you're gonna see are straight JPEGs. And here's what I'm really excited to talk about when it comes to this camera. First and foremost, image quality. The images look beautiful. I don't think anybody is going to tell you otherwise when it comes to Nikon. Like, the images that you get out of a Nikon camera are gorgeous. They just look really, really pleasing. They're beautiful to look at, and they look really nice on the screen as well, like on your EVF or on your monitor on the camera, which is great because if you're taking photos of people, you want to be able to show them a photo and they look at it and go, wow. And you get that with Nikon, which is just really, really helpful. It's a little thing, but it's important. Even in the JPEG, there's lots of dynamic range. The colors pop, they're crisp, the saturation is nice. They're nice and sharp. Everything to do with it feels really good. Like I said, these are just the JPEGs, so we're gonna have to reserve judgment until we can open up the RAW files. Looking at the ergonomics, it's a very comfortable camera to use. It feels pretty much exactly like the Z6 III, which is what I'm filming on right now. It's maybe a tiny bit smaller, not like super noticeably smaller, but it's a little bit thinner and a little bit lighter, but only by about 50 grams. So I would say that if you're used to using something like the Z6 III or the Z6 II, any of the, I would say, like modern mirrorless cameras from Nikon, it's gonna feel very familiar to you. When I was shooting the runners, I was using gloves, and I did find that things like the D-pad was kind of hard to use with gloves, but the actual dials were fine and the shutter button was fine. It was just having to change some of the things with the D-pad was not ideal, and the touchscreen wasn't the easiest either. Something like maybe like the Z8 or Z9 might feel a little bit more comfortable with gloves. So it depends on how much you're shooting with gloves, if that's really gonna affect you, or if you happen to have, you know, gloves where the fingers can come off and stuff like that. And finally, and most excitedly about the ergonomics of this bad boy, is they fixed an issue that they had with the Z6 III that friggin' drives me crazy constantly, which is when you open up the battery door, the little D-rings, is that what they're called? That you strap the camera to, they get in the way of opening the battery door on the Z6 III, and they fixed that for this camera. So now you can open this up with ease, not have any issues. I can actually get at my SD cards. That's exciting. Autofocus, the big one everyone always wants to know about, autofocus. So the autofocus on this feels very reminiscent of the ZF when I'm using it. I think it's not quite as confident as the Z6 III, which is probably due to that partially stacked sensor that we get out of the Z6 III, but beyond that, it does feel really good. It doesn't hunt like crazy or anything like that. I find that it does a pretty good job overall. Photographing the runners was probably the most like dynamic, complicated thing that I had to do, and I felt like it kept up fine. There was multiple situations where there's like 5 or 6 runners at once. Behind them is like road signs and busy like trees and leaves, stuff that can mess up autofocus. And overall, it did great. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't as confident as the Z6 III would have been, but it was very close. And I still think that the overall margin of keepers was quite high. I would say that the results were very good considering how complicated it was yesterday. It was also like pouring rain and it was just like, yeah, it was a lot.
So we're in the middle of a shoot. It is freaking wet out and it's holding up great. This is what we're shooting today. A bunch of fast people. The Z5 is just, it's doing really well. The buffer's clearing very fast considering. It's getting soaked, but doesn't seem to be any problems. And we're using a third-party lens and it's working great. So I'm very impressed.
What I will say is that when the camera chose to focus on somebody, when it had picked the person out of the 5 or 6, it was very good at staying on that person. It was cool though to see how it performed in the rain, and it did really well. Honestly, it was great. Now, video on this camera is very good. It's a very competent, solid video camera. It's very similar to the ZF, and I've used that for a lot of video. I think ergonomically it's easier than the ZF. I think it's easier to hold onto. I think the IBIS is really good in it. If you've watched any other reviews, you've probably seen that there's some like complicated stuff going on with the raw video. It looks like maybe there's some issues there. Maybe people are talking about some line skipping, blah, blah, blah. I don't really focus on any of that when it comes to video, because I'm not putting this through like the ringer when it comes to video. This to me would be a great option if you're anywhere that's like 60-40 in terms of photo video. So if you're doing like 60% video, 40% photo, or vice versa, you're gonna be really happy with this. I think you're gonna get a lot out of this. The rolling shutter isn't great. I will say like it's a slower sensor than on the Z6 III, so the rolling shutter is more noticeable, but it's not terrible. If you're doing a ton of sports and you're pan whipping all the time and moving it around, you'll notice it. And you have to ask yourself if that's something you can live with. But beyond that, for more like static shots, for interviews, for following subjects around that aren't running really fast or like zooming by or whatever, super confident, very, very good video functionality out of this camera. And I say that based on the limited amount of time I've spent with it as a video camera, but knowing how the ZF performs gives me a lot of confidence in saying that I think this will work just fine for you. Overall value for money for this. I think for the price point it's at, it's probably the best camera on the market. I don't think you're gonna find a better camera at this price, which is very impressive. Functionally, ergonomically, it is superior to the ZF, absolutely. There's no doubting that. I love using the ZF and I use it all the time. I don't find it to be an ergonomically poor camera, but this is going to feel better on a long day. To be honest, I would take this camera over what was probably a previous recommendation from me for people, which was the Canon R8. I still think the R8 is a fantastic camera, but this camera at this price point compared to the R8 at its price point, I just think like you're getting a way bigger battery, you're getting image stabilization out of this camera, you're getting dual card slots. It's a superior camera. And yeah, you're paying a bit more, but not like way more. And I think you're getting a lot more camera out of this. So I don't see myself recommending the R8 anytime soon now, especially because that lens mount is just problematic, obviously. The Sony a7 IV would be another one that I would compare to this. I would say, I like that has the 33 megapixel sensor. I think that's a really nice sweet spot for a lot of different stuff. But beyond that, like it's kind of showing its age a little bit. Still a very good camera, but I had a ton of overheating issues with mine, even after the firmware updates. And I just think for the price, you're getting a very comparable camera here at a price point that just makes more sense, and that I think you can grow into with this camera just as well. And then this camera can become an excellent second camera to what you're doing. And the other one I would say is like the Fuji X-T5, which I love the look of that camera and the feel of it. I've shot tons of Fuji and I love Fuji. However, I would say again, like dollar for dollar, pound for pound, you're getting more out of this camera. The build quality on this camera, I think, is better than the X-T5, and that's a problem with the X-T5 that we've heard over and over, is that Since the X-T3, the build quality has just kind of gone down on that series of cameras, and that is not the case with this. Like, this feels very, very good in the hands. It's also full frame, which if you care about full frame versus crop sensor, you're getting a full frame camera here, which you wouldn't there. And the autofocus, I would say, is superior for sure. So Nikon's put out a bunch of cameras over this past few years, and this camera, at first I wasn't sure where it would fit in, but it actually makes a lot of sense to me now. If you look at price points, if you look at quality, if you look at what you're getting out of all the system, I think this one fits into a really nice little niche. As far as I'm concerned, it's the best camera in the Nikon lineup to bridge the gap between like enthusiast to professional. If you are somebody who's starting to make money off of your photography and you are looking to upgrade your kit, this is like a very excellent choice. It would also be like a great second camera to the Z6 III or even the ZF if you wanted something that maybe ergonomically feels a little bit more comfortable for long shoots. This would be great. It would match well. The footage would look good together. The photos would look great together. Like, the whole system would work well together. So yeah, I think this is a great camera. I do. And my limited time shooting with it is making me hopeful that it's something that I could pick up one day if I decide that I want to move away from having the ZF as my second body. So if you're trying to decide between cameras right now and you just saw this come out, I will say I think it's a really compelling option, and I would highly consider it. And again, like I said, this is a full production unit, which means that the experience I'm having is going to be the same as the one you're having. There's nothing that is going to change between now and the ship date. So thank you so much to Nikon Canada and Chris for sending this over. It's really cool to be able to test out a brand new camera. It doesn't happen for me ever. It's never happened. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I'm very curious. Are you going to pick up this camera? Are you excited about it? What are you hearing about this camera? Just dive into the comments. Let's get it going. Thanks so much. Peace.